damages in the case of low-income countries in Asia, especially in Asia, and that is to the tune of around 42%. So we know the floods are the most common natural hazards, and the studies show that Kerala in flood has the 4th place in the country with regard to vulnerability to flood, and nearly 14.5% of the state is prone to flood. So, and the government also has given an assessment. At the same time, the UN also reports that there is a 42% reduction or less reporting of the damage assessment. We from KAU decided to conduct an assessment to know the agricultural loss due to the flood to the farm households of a river basin, and that is the Chalakudy Pura River or Chalakudy River Basin. And we used the damage and loss assessment methodology given by FAO in 2012. And the aim of the assessment or of the study was to estimate the damage and loss suffered by the farm households along the floodplains in a scientific and systematic way. Because we know whenever some disaster happens after the natural disaster like drought or flood, the State Department of Agriculture, they will conduct some analysis or there's some estimation, and they will be giving away some compensation to the farmers. But the UN analysis or the UN, they have said that, or they have remarked that most of the cases, this is very much underreported. So in order to know whether, to what extent this is happening, this study has been undertaken. And in this context, there is the standard procedure given by FAO in 2012 is there. And in that, usually we think about damage only, but there should be two different concepts, like damage and loss. These two have to be identified separately. What is damage and what is loss? So damage means it is a total or partial destruction of physical assets in the affected area. And it usually it occurs immediately or during or immediately after the disaster. And the monetary value for it is mainly assessed in terms of replacement or repair cost. And in the case of loss, it is different, and it is meant as the change in economic flows arising from the disaster. That is, if you, in the case of a crop, if the crop got damaged or lost, then there is a continuous flow of income that has to be got from the crop is being lost. You take the case of seasonal crops, or you take the case of perennial crops. And we have experienced this in the case of, mainly in the case of the perennial crop nutmeg, that has a lot of loss, and then banana, this loss has been there. So whenever we go for any loss, this damage or the effect of this type of disasters, then we have to differentiate between damage and loss. So the economic loss consists of the damage and loss, and the damage is a total or partial destruction, and loss is the change in economic flows. And so there are standard procedures have been developed, and this have been assessed based on the standard procedure, like using these equations. And what I want to highlight is that after our analysis, what we got is that from the floodplain consisting of some 19 panchayats and all, the total damage and loss or the effect was to the tune of 259.4 crores in the floodplain. This is what we got from our analysis. At the same time, the State Agriculture Department assessment of report of damage to crops in the selected block was only 6 crores. But and we got a corresponding figure of for even the crop damage.
Madam, slide is not moving.
Yeah, screen is not moving.
not moving. It is in the first slide. You kindly check,
Okay, so
please. No problem. No problem.
might,
Just first slide it is. Yes.
might be, I will go to the note for the, I will exit from this end. I will move with
Okay.
the
Yes.
other mode. Yeah, might be
Uh,
because my connection is slow.
okay. Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
Now it's okay. Yeah. Good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Now it is visible.
Yes. Yes. It's visible, madam.
Yeah, I think
Please.
I can move in this way only. And these are the slides that I have been using for the discussion.
Okay.
And what I want to highlight is that using the standard procedure, what we found is that the agricultural damage and loss that we estimated is something around 260 crores in the floodplain. But in the same area, the State Agriculture Department assessed the damage to crop as 6 crores alone. And we got it as something around 48 crores. And this corroborates with the UN, their observation that there is something around 40 or 40 to 50% less of being reported when we come to the damage and loss reporting. So the need to distinguish damage. Yeah, is it audible? Yeah.
Yes.
So we have to, what we need is that we should have a standard procedure and we should know how to distinguish the damage, the loss, and then have a common calculation or common standard procedure for calculating this. So this has been given to the government as a policy document, and that was done during the 2018. This was after the 2018 floods. And because the corona came in between, we were not able to do it with the also taking care of the livestock. That is why we confined only to the crop sector. So this is the background which prompted me to take this as a topic for today's presentation. And now the 28th COP summit that happened in the Dubai, that has highlighted the need for having a robust reporting or assessment of the loss and damages due to disasters. And we know that agriculture represents nearly 4% of the GDP of the world as a whole, and it is for the low-income countries amounts to around 1/4 of this GDP. And agriculture is vulnerable to climate variability and change also. And globally, it is said that the global economic losses due to natural disasters are to the tune of around $313 billion US. And in South Asia, floods results in nearly 19 billion economic loss to the countries. So, and it is observed that between 1920 and 2021, in 50 years, there are around more than around approximately 12,000 reported disasters, 2 million deaths, and 4.3 trillion economic loss globally. So this warrants towards the need for the loss and damage assessment. So before going to that, we need to have an understanding about what are natural disasters. And natural disasters have been defined as low probability, high consequence events that can result in significant human losses and economic shocks. And this definition is given by IPCC in 2012. And we will not be able to say when they will occur. So that is why they are low probable, but they have high consequence and resulting in human losses and economic shocks. And India has been listed among the top 10 countries in terms of absolute losses due to disasters. And our annual loss of GDP is to the tune of around 0.5% we are losing due to the floods. So in this background, the IPCC and COP has given some messages regarding the need for damage and loss assessment. And the key message is that the human-induced climate change has already caused losses to both nature and people, and the losses and damage are unequally distributed across systems, regions, and sectors. And they need to be comprehensively addressed by financial, are not comprehensively addressed by the current financial governance and institutional arrangements, particularly in vulnerable developing countries. Losses and damages escalate with every increment of global warming. And the near-term action that it would limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade would reduce future losses, but cannot eliminate them. So we are having the activities and actions so that we could limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, but we are not in a position to eliminate them altogether. So even effective adaptation cannot prevent all losses and damages. So what we can do is that, what we have to do is that we have to come up with a better assessment of losses and damages, and then we have to come up with the adequate and the appropriate climate finance mechanisms so that the losses and damages due to the natural disasters, especially the developing and less developing countries, can be addressed, can be taken care of. The 28th session of the Conference of the Parties, that is COP28, reiterated the need for robust disaster loss and assessment, and has come out with the major guidelines. And these are the guidelines that they have come out. And the earlier framework was the one developed by United Nations Sendai Framework, United Nations Sendai Framework in 2012. And the assessment of losses and damages featured in the recent IPCC working group represents a major step forward in recognizing existing negative impacts of future risk of climate change. And the assessment provides strong support for increased action for loss and damage and urgent mitigation to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Then, now we have seen we are going to see what is disaster loss and damage assessment. So it is a systematic process to evaluate the impact of a disaster. And we know it analyzes the physical, social, economic, and environmental consequences. And it also provides a data to guide response, recovery, and risk reduction efforts. So there is the hazard. It also, the vulnerability is there, and or the exposure to the natural disasters is also there. So all this together makes this the agriculture highly risky, and we have to address all these things. So there is a discussion, or there is a controversy in this regarding the name. That is, whether it should be loss and damage or whether it should be losses and damages. So the IPCC Working Group 2, that is for the COP28, that has reported that there is a difference between losses and damage and loss and damage. So accordingly, what is loss and damage? So loss and damage refers to political debate where it is established under the Warsaw Mechanism on loss and damage. It is a political debate that is happening between the countries, nations. What is the loss and damage to a country, nation? Whereas the term losses and damage refers to the harm from observed impacts and projected risk, and can be economic or non-economic. So in our analysis, that is in the analysis in agriculture damage and loss, we have to use the term, it is more appropriate to use the term losses and damages. So the loss and damage assessment or losses and damage assessment will help us to get better information about the effective resource allocation. It supports the recovery and planning, and it also strengthens the risk reduction strategies, and promotes accountability and transparency. So what we need is that all we should have a standardized format for doing this risk and the loss and damage assessment. That is the what is required. And for this, we have to come out with the strategies for doing this. And the UN and FAO has also given the ways how to proceed with this.
Madam, slide is not moving. You kindly check, please.
Yeah. So the timeline of loss and damage in the international climate discourse, we started from the UNFCCC initial discussion itself, and even through the Kyoto Protocol, then the COP11 Montreal and the Warsaw, and then again COP26 Glasgow, everywhere. This type of the need for the loss and damage assessment was discussed, and it is in the COP27, the latest, that the final agreement on the establishment of the losses and damage framework and a losses and damage fund was also has been decided. And accordingly, there is the reporting on loss and damage in various countries shows that, as I told you, in Asia, South Asia, there is underreporting of the loss and damage. So this highlights the need for countries like us to move robust, to have a robust accounting procedure for loss and damage assessment. So there are different methods used for loss and damage also. One is the FAO damage and loss assessment methodology, and the other one is the World Bank, the post-disaster need assessment. So this post-disaster need assessment is mainly for deciding on the resource allocation for recovery, whereas the damage and loss assessment is for quantifying the impacts. The focus is different, and in the FAO, it is quantifying the direct damage and losses, like what we have doing in the case of agricultural loss assessment and all. Whereas the PDNA focuses on the overall post-disaster need assessment. That is, it not only considers the productive sector, production sector, also the other sectors also, and the lives and livelihood restoration, then the infrastructure restoration, everything that is coming under the World Bank PDNA assessment. And the FAO is mainly for the agriculture sector. The other one is multi-sectoral. And the methodology, the FAO has given some standard computation methods, and the World Bank also has the PDNA standardized modules. For agriculture also it has. And data collection is in FAO, it is quantitative data we are using, whereas in World Bank PDNA, it uses both quantitative and qualitative data. It is about the how the quality of the life that has been affected. All those things are taken consideration the PDNA, and the benefits are, it's a structured approach for quantifying the impacts and inform mainly for resource allocation for recovery. So how the resources need to be allocated for the recovery operations and other repair operations and all. And the limitation is that in the case of FAO, since it is only quantitative, it may not capture broader impacts, and the PDNA requires a lot of resources. Since after the disaster, when a country is already devastated, then this much amount of resource will not be possible for the country to deploy. So that is the main limitation with the PDNA, even though it is a very elaborate and exhaustive method. And the FAO methodology, especially for agriculture, the 5 components are considered which cover the direct damage and loss to crops: livestock, forestry, aquaculture, and fisheries. That is, agriculture includes not only crop, it includes livestock, forestry, aquaculture, and fisheries. And the total effect of disasters on agriculture is given as the impact to agriculture as a sum total of the impact to crop, livestock, forestry, aquaculture, and fisheries. So all the sectors are taken into consideration when we look into the FAO methodology for this disaster. And then So this is a nutshell about how it is targeting or observing this, and that is crop. Like for all the 5 sectors, we can have 2 different categories. That is production and assets. Production, it is the damage. In assessing the damage, what we need is the pre-disaster value of destroyed and the stored production and inputs. So we will be taking into account the pre-disaster value of destroyed, stored production and inputs. So that is like items like seed, fertilizer, pesticide, etc. And in the case of damage, production is there, and assets are also will also get damaged. And for that assets, we are taking the replacement or repair value of the destroyed machinery. And like, for example, the items include tractors, harvesters, the fishing gear, pumps, everything. So we will be using the replacement or repair value for the destroyed machinery. In the case of loss, we have to take the difference between the expected and actual value of production and short-term disaster expense. That is, the loss can be for the crop yield reduction, the animal production reduction, destroyed timber, the loss of fish capture, etc. And in the loss, we can also have another classification like loss due to seasonal crops or annual crops, and the loss due to the perennial crops. So these 2 type of loss will be different, and altogether we can come to the total disaster effect. So how can FAO's damage and loss methodology be used in the context of the enhanced transparency framework? So this is the FAO 2012 framework, and the COP27, the latest, their discussion was how it can be used for the enhanced transparency framework, which is used by the IPCC for assessment of the damage and loss. And for that, they have given some guidelines how to use the methodology uniformly by all nations so that climate finance can be streamlined. Because now the climate finance or climate funds are being given not based on this type of assessments. So we need to have the standard assessments, and based on the standard assessments, we have to streamline we have to allocate the climate funds for the different nations in order to recoup their economy. And we want to use the D&L methodology, and what are the next steps? If we want to use them, what are the next steps we have to do? And the FAO has a guideline that this can be used to prepare adaptation information for the extended framework. The countries provide information related to support and to avert and minimize the loss and damage associated with the climate change impacts. And in order to have this type of analysis or estimates, the countries have to contact, that is the latest recommendation that has come from FAO. The countries have to contact FAO so that they will help the countries to make the exact estimates of loss and damage, and the initial scoping exercise to assess the current state of damage and loss assessment in agriculture and existing damage and loss information system in the country take place. So we have to have an idea, we have to have an assessment about the existing damage and loss information in the country, and how that has to be improved in accordance with the standard formats that is being given by the FAO. And FAO and the countries can enter into an agreement so that national or international level workshops on the key concepts and application of the methodology will be organized by FAO, and the governments can use or train themselves for using this methodology or this method for making a robust analysis about estimate on the damage and loss due to the disasters. So that is what is required now, because in most of the cases, what we find is that there is a 40 to 42% reduction in or underestimation or underreporting of loss and damage, means that our farmers are getting compensated less than 40% or 40 what they need. So that is what I have to transfer with you at this the end of the day. So thank you for giving me an opportunity. And what I want to tell you is that from a small study in a river basin, we could find that there is a gross uh, underreporting of the damage to the farming community and the damage and loss. Or usually what we assess is only the damage, but we also have to take care of the long-term impact that is causing on loss that is happening on the farmers. So only then we can compensate them, or they can, or we can compensate them for the loss they incurred. And since due to the climate change, we are facing these disasters and natural disasters, and the climate extreme events are becoming very frequent, we need to have some standard procedures. And these standard procedures, for that, we need to get ourselves trained and equipped in using them. And not only the scientific or the fraternity, but also the agriculture extension persons also should be trained in that. So this is what I had prepared to share with you.